Hi there, this is Russell Downs. I am a longtime Westwood resident since 1958. Began my teaching in '58 and retired in 1992. I went from high school in Medford, Massachusetts, into the military because I did not have any idea as to what I thought my future would be, and I thought it would be a good experience to go into the military. So I voluntarily went in. I wasn't drafted. And the people who took me in to the military sent me off actually to a hospital. They had asked my permission, and I said I thought I would be interested. And so they sent me off to the Great Lakes Naval Hospital in Illinois. And that's where I got my initial training as a hospital corpsman. Of course, at that time, the war had not broke out. So when the war did break out in June of 1950, they sent me off to a military attachment with the Marines because they do not have their own medical staff. And so then they sent me out to Camp Pendleton out in Oceanside, California, where I did all my training because of the territory out there in California, which is a lot like Korea would be, which is the flatlands and the high mountainous type things. Of course, not the temperature-wise, but. And so I thought I had pretty good training, but I certainly didn't expect the war to be quite as, I hate to use the word, but as vicious as it was. And it was an experience which, of course, I think made my life respect life even more, and kind of living one day at a time and being happy that I'm still living. And so when I got into the Korean War, we did the training at Camp Pendleton, and then they sent us overseas, going to Guam first and then right on to Korea. And we made 3 basic landings, 2 of which got no resistance whatsoever, and that was, I believe it was called Pyongyang, which was on the east coast. And then we made a landing at Pusan at the very lower part of Korea, where we also received no resistance at all. So then they made the boats, which are called LSTs, where the front flops down and you go right out onto the beach. And that was, if any of you know anything about the movie Saving Private Ryan, I don't know if you saw it or not, that would be a good name for you, Ryan, Saving Private Ryan. It was probably one of the most disastrous confrontations. And if anybody during the 5 years I spent in the military would say that you're not frightened when you are in that kind of experience, I know they're lying. It was with bullets flying past your head and not napalm, then we got that later. But rockets landing, and we lost a lot of people right then and there.
On the beach at Inchon.
Right on the beach, yeah. So.
Your responsibility, your duty that day was to do what?
Well, my job was to go up to anybody who had been wounded, and the thing we found out right away was something which was unbelievable, is that we were wearing the Red Crosses on our helmets and on our arm. And they did not abide by the Geneva Treaty. And thus, they were shooting right at us, even if we were just going out to help somebody. So they made us take that off, and they actually issued us armed weapons, rifles, which we had been trained with anyway. But and so then we went on further and made an advancement in the lower level of Korea, because this is the good weather still. Like rice paddy type movement it was, so it wasn't that nice either, but we didn't get a lot of resistance then until we started to get up into the a little bit higher levels, and that was when the temperature changed. Once you got into September, the weather became unbelievable, and as we made the march up to the Yalu River, we lost many people from sometimes napalm landing. We were so close to the enemy that often it would even kill some of our own guys who were in foxholes and any kind of a shelter you could find. And the other thing which kind of, I think, demoralized me a little bit was that every time we got resistance, it was only in the early morning, dawn, just as the sun began to come up. And when we saw those that we had shot, they were like 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old. They had just thrown anybody in there to try to attack us. And then, of course, as we got higher, heading up to the Alu, the temperatures got even lower, sometimes in below zero, and we weren't given the proper equipment, which would prevent us from getting frostbite, and we even had people dying from frostbite, just exposure, total exposure. So I know MacArthur had tried to get us going up into China, crossing the border and all that, which I don't understand to this day, but and everybody says the same.
Right.
And so then finally the enemy, which was the Chinese and the North Koreans, had certainly advantage over us in a sense, because we couldn't even get our vehicles up there. The terrain was so difficult, and that's why I couldn't understand why MacArthur even would attempt. I mean, he should be smart enough to know that. So we had to make the retreat. So we went through all that retreat, in which we lost many, many men. So in the particular dog company that I was in, the first division of the 5th Marines Dog Company, we had, I think there were about 10 people left out of that whole dog company. So that was extremely difficult for me too.
Yeah. Of the company size when it began, how many was in the company to begin with?
Hundreds.
Hundreds.
I'm not sure the exact number.
Right.
Yeah.
But either killed or wounded had left, and
Yeah.
there was only maybe 10 there at the end.
Right.
Right.
So I don't want you to.
Right.
Any questions?
What was, I guess, your first combat experience like when you first got onto the beach and saw so many people instantly wounded or killed, having to try and save those people right on your first day of combat?
Well, I think your immediate initiative is to get to whoever you thought was hurt, and then you found out there were others who were hurt worse than them, and you did whatever you could quickly for someone, and then went on to those who you thought might, not make it, and you wanted to do anything major you could to save their life. But you were also getting so much going on at the same time you were trying to do whatever you could for them, because the enemy was not allowing you to go to your wounded, and they were shooting right at you, so you still had to be extremely careful and not just be out in the open, which you normally would have been able to do if they were abiding by that Geneva Treaty. But it was the experience was just overwhelming. And I think your intent is that you don't think about your life anymore. You're out there for a purpose, and I think that's what I tried to deal with it that way, and not just run off and hide somewhere.
You just stayed focused on your purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said in your paper how, excuse me, how it took a very long time for you to be able to talk about your experiences, and how was that at first? How the history teacher got you to talk about what you had seen and to her classes?
I think her comment, she almost sounded like a guidance counselor, because I think she knew that I really was overwhelmed with this thing still, because I would say certain things when I was in the teacher's room, and because they knew I'd been in the war, and they knew I didn't want to talk. So as she sort of condoled me and influenced me in whatever way, I don't know what actually brought me to the light that I think this is probably the best thing for me to do.